The agenda this week heard Northern Ontario's pitch to bring immigrants north of the French River, reflected on 1,000 Sunday Mornings with Michael Enright, and examined pathways for healthy grieving with Julia Samuel. The agenda's week in review begins with a contest to lead the Ontario Progressive Conservatives.
Let's say then the four of you are unanimous in your opposition to the one thing in your platform that will pay for all of the promises in your platform. So I need to understand, if there's no carbon tax, how are you paying for all of the promises that are therein?
Well, we need to be fiscally responsible and environmentally responsible. So we are looking at solutions for that right now, but one thing that we would do is do a value for money audit. And I was an auditor in a previous career for a bank. I know I want to audit Kathleen Wynne's economic mess that she's made of Ontario. We can find millions of dollars of savings there that we can use towards the principles and the programs that we've put in our platform.
You say millions of dollars in savings, but you got to find $4 billion if you want to pay for all the promises in the People's Guarantee.
Yes, and I'm certainly not saying that would pay for everything, but it's about $1 billion per year. Look at the money that the Liberals wasted. $1 billion on cancelled gas plants for purely political purposes, $8 billion on e-health, and we still don't have a working system of electronic medical records. We can find those savings.
Do you have any other ideas to raise the $4 billion if you are in fact signing on to the People's Guarantee, which by running, theoretically you have?
Well, Steve, first of all, I was the first candidate to come out of the gate. I wasn't flip-flopping, I wasn't humming and hawing. I'm dead against the carbon tax. Carbon tax is terrible for the people of Ontario. It's terrible for businesses. It doesn't make us competitive in a worldwide market.
Let's establish that you're all against the carbon tax. How are you going to pay for the promises in the People's Guarantee?
Very simply, Steve, I'm going to ask our listeners out there, in a $141 billion budget, do you think that we can find 2 or 3%? When I've crisscrossed the province, I've asked everyone that. Their first reaction, Steve, is they break out laughing. Second reaction is only 2 or 3%. So 2% is close to $3 billion. I'm the only one with a proven track record of saving taxpayers' money. We saved over $1 billion on a $9.6 billion budget. When we first went down to the City of Toronto, we sat around the table my very first day, and the CFO came up to us and said, "You're facing $774 million of pressure, and we have to raise taxes." Well, we didn't raise taxes. We delivered a 0% tax increase, made sure that we found savings, efficiencies. We focused on best practices, lean systems.
And you think you can do this at the provincial level?
We'll do it a lot easier at the provincial level than we did at the city.
Let me put Dan Robertson's quote up as I just get Caroline Mulrooney to comment on this as well. He's, of course, a strategist in the Leader's Office, the previous Leader's Office, who tweeted after your positions on the carbon tax became abundantly clear, "If you drop the carbon tax, there is no, quote, rest of the platform. No middle-class tax cut, no child care refund, no mental health investment, no dental care for low-income seniors." So again, if you're signed on to the People's Guarantee, how do you pay for it if there's no carbon tax?
Well, the platform included the carbon tax, but also a value for money audit, as Christine was alluding to. And Doug talks about finding 2 cents on every dollar. I think that's a very good start. I don't think there's anybody in this province who doesn't think that the Liberals have been wasting our money for the last 15 years. The Fraser Institute announced just recently that they've increased pre-election spending by $7 billion. And the provincial auditor, somebody with whom Kathleen Wynne likes to argue instead of taking advice, looked at 14 programs out of over 100 and found $1 billion of waste. So they've created a culture of waste at Queen's Park. So we have to stop that. But the Liberals will come out with a budget in a few weeks. And if past performance is any indication of the future, I'm sure there'll be some spending increases. So on June 7th, when I present my plan to the voters of Ontario, it will be a fully costed plan, but it will reflect the new budget numbers.
You all know that the federal government mandates that you have some kind of climate change plan in place. The current plan is a cap and trade plan that the government of Ontario has brought forward. What's your plan going to be?
Well, Justin Trudeau doesn't tell us what to do in Ontario on everything, much as he might like to think he does. And we don't need to tax people in order to be environmentally responsible. There are other ways we can do it through innovation, new technologies, and so on. Ontarians don't need more taxes. We stand against that as progressive conservatives. We want to lower taxes.
Would you keep the cap and trade plan?
No, I would get rid of it. Look, every time Justin Trudeau hatches some new cockamamie idea, it doesn't mean that we as Ontario have to accept it. Steve, we need to review this, and we need to definitely say no to cap and trade and carbon tax. And if Justin Trudeau tries to force this on us, I'll take him to court and I'll fight him every step of the way. And if he so continues to, and if we're forced to adopt this carbon tax, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take our current gas tax, we'll change its name to carbon, and that'll be the carbon tax. But I say no to carbon tax. We're conservatives. Let's stick to our values. Let's stick to our principles. Let's not adopt Justin Trudeau's policies. And can I just say one more thing? It would be nice for once in a while for us progressive conservatives to support our federal cousins up there, led by Andrew Scheer, and support them in battling Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax.
Here's what Preston Manning had to say about all this. You all know that he had his conference recently in Ottawa. He said, "It's fine to be opposed to the carbon tax, but if that's all we've got to say, it's hardly adequate to address environmental concerns. Is there more to your environmental platform, Mr. Ford, than simply axe the tax?"
Well, first of all, I call it not cap and trade, I call it cap and tax. And I had an opportunity to speak to a counterpart in Alberta named Jason Kenney yesterday. And if we have to take Prime Minister Trudeau to court, we'll take him to court. We are sending, I don't think the people of Ontario understand, we are sending $480 million to Quebec and California for carbon credits. That's done. That $480 million is staying in Ontario. This is about creating jobs, getting our economy going, making sure we start respecting the taxpayer. People are sick and tired of being taxed. We need job creation.
But you wouldn't
what we need.
You wouldn't deny that there is carbon tax revenue, there is cap and trade revenue coming into Ontario right now that the current government depends on and recirculates into green programs.
This Green Energy Act is a joke. It's what it is the Bay Street people are making hundreds of millions, billions of dollars on this. They're charging X, throw out a figure of, let's say 70, when they should be charging 10. The only people getting hurt on this, Steve, is the average people, the average household. They're getting gouged at the pumps. Gas pumps is another 4.5 cents. I'm about putting money back into the taxpayer's pocket, not into the government's pocket.
Let's get more on the environmental policy of the Mulroney campaign. If you're against the carbon tax, if you're against cap and trade, what else have you got?
Well, conservation is a conservative principle, and we've got to look at all the ways that we can work to conserve our environment and our lakes and our rivers and our forests. We have to look at technology and ways to innovate our industries to make sure that we are working with industry to change behaviors. But adding a carbon tax at $50 a ton, even at $50 a ton, doesn't get to where we need to actually alter people's behavior. It's just adding taxes to people who are already overburdened.
Can I understand as well, are you all in agreement with the People's Guarantee for a 22% tax cut, the income tax cut? I'm seeing nodding head, nodding head, yes. Okay, you're all on side with that. Here's the question. If you look at the economic currents of history, we are actually, if one of you becomes premier, we will be due in your term for another recession. It's not to say it's guaranteed to happen. After all, economists have predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions. But is it prudent to be cutting taxes, potentially ballooning the deficit, leaving no room to maneuver should we have an economic downturn? Ms. Mulroney.
It's important that we start putting money back in people's pockets. Our government in Ontario, this Liberal government, has been spending money without thinking about putting money back into people's pockets.
Even if it means going back into deficit?
The platform will have a small deficit. We're working towards it, but the idea is not to put the province into deficit. The idea is to get money back into people's pockets so they can spend it and we can move out of any kind of difficulty that we have. This government needs to learn to do more with less. And the size of the budget has doubled under the Liberals. It's time that stops.
You are prepared to cut taxes 22%, even if it means going back into deficit?
We need to do it. We absolutely need to do it. People are really finding life difficult in Ontario right now. And when you have to choose between paying your hydro bill and putting food on the table, that's not a choice that anybody should have to make. We need to make sure that Ontarians can care for their families, that they can be successful, that our young people can find jobs. So we need to do it. We saw the federal government do that with my late husband when he was a finance minister. We did go into a deficit for a period of time, but we have to have a plan to get out of deficit. You have to be prepared to take the steps that you need to take. So does anybody want to go into deficit? No. But if you do, you need to have a plan to get out. But Ontarians right now need relief.
You okay with a 22% tax cut?
You know what? I wanted to interject there because I wanted to actually speak to it. You know, we keep talking about this platform, but we need to recognize that was Patrick Brown's platform. That platform died the day Patrick Brown resigned.
That's not what the rules of your party say, with all due respect. The rules of the party say you get to run for leader if you support the aims and the values of the People's Guarantee.
Well,
and
those
you're
are the
running.
policies.
Of their platform.
Those are the policies.
Not the People's Guarantee, of the policy, of the platform. I will respect the leader. I'll follow their platform. People's Guarantee, sure, we can keep it, but I don't believe in the People's Magazine version of 90 pages.
So when my brother came to Canada, I was able to experience his entering Canada very differently. I came in as a visitor, I applied to be a worker here, and then I stayed and then applied, you know, went through that process. He came as a landed immigrant, and in the airport, he was given a red bag. And of course, I was curious to find out what is he getting in that red bag. And all the advertisement, everything led to and pointed to the GTHA. And so right away I started thinking, in our rural communities, we're missing the opportunity of telling our story in that red bag.
You got to get in that red bag.
We need to get in the red bag. And I told him that about 7 or 8 years ago, almost, when he came here. And that's one of the things that I saw immediately lacking. I was already living in Teeswater, working on workforce development issues, and that's where we saw that our rural communities are doing ourselves a disservice by not telling our story.
Charles.
So there was two things as part of the earlier conversation that kind of jumped out at me as mistakes that northern and rural communities make. And the first one is to say that that immigrants aren't enthusiastic about our communities. I think that's a mistake. I think when we talk to immigrants about our communities, when they become aware, there's a high level of enthusiasm. So let's not kind of characterize it as it's an unpleasant place or an unattractive place to immigrants. I think, as the point was made earlier, the real problem is there's simply a total lack of awareness in large part.
You've got to make the case.
And when we get on their radar screen, when they actually consider us, they get very enthusiastic.
Well, Wayne, let's hit something right on the head here, okay? I mean, you can tell me if it's a misimpression, but there may be an impression out there that for racialized communities, for visible minorities, rural and northern Ontario is a tougher place to live than, say, in the bigger cities. True or false?
It depends. I would say that there are people that would perceive that, and I think there are some things in large urban centers provide a range of services that many rural communities are more challenged to provide in terms of helping new immigrants to become integrated within the community, to be aware of the employment opportunities that might be there. But there are many rural communities that do a fantastic job of trying to do that really well. And I think there's some really successful examples. We've done research looking at examples, for example, from Oxford County, Perth County are two communities that we've seen do some really interesting things in working with the communities to try to make people feel welcome, help them find employment opportunities, English as a second language, that range of services that newcomers to communities often are looking for.
You know I want to ask you this question. So tell me, have you run into any racism in your part of the province?
Absolutely. And I think it wasn't a thought when we moved into the area. Never did we think about that as something that would happen. But in the school, when we moved to the rural community, our children were young, and so they entered the school, and they had their issues. It's really interesting. My son, we just showed him a picture of Dad when he first came to Canada. So my husband came when he was about 10 or 11, and it was his grade 5 picture. And my son said, "Oh, I see Dad's had the similar challenges," because Dad was the only child of color in his class. And it was very interesting.
And your kids were too?
Yes, they still actually, our daughter actually maybe have one other ethnic friend in her class. And not so long ago, when our, third child went into high school, I was worried about my daughter. I was really worried about her being in the class because in that school, only because there had been mentions of, don't play with the brown girl and things like that. So
what? Who said that?
Children in the school.
Children would say, don't play with the brown girl.
Don't play with the brown girl. And we had a conversation, my husband and I, about should we homeschool? Should we look at moving? Should we change her school? And we decided we weren't going to do that. Our daughter is very resilient. She's a wonderful, she's 13, and she's a wonderful young lady growing up, and she speaks up for herself, which is really nice. And I think that's the resilience that can be built. But it's tough as a parent. We asked ourselves over the years, did we make the right decision? We love where we are. We have integrated ourselves into the community, but we know that we recognize now that our children did have some struggles.
Let's not pretend that that doesn't occur in large urban centers.
You're reading my mind. I just was about to say, let's state the obvious. Racism is everywhere, and we shouldn't give the impression that it's only in rural or northern parts of the province. We're sitting here in the biggest city in the country, and of course there's racism in this city as well. Your Worship, I want you to weigh in on that too, if you would, because Sault Ste. Marie has had its troubles with those kinds of issues in the past. Is it a problem today?
Yeah, look, I want to recognize and acknowledge Gemma's experiences and be respectful of them. I have lived in, obviously, Sault Ste. Marie most of my life, but I've also lived in Kitchener-Waterloo, I've lived in Toronto, I've lived in Halifax, and I've lived in Ottawa. And I've traveled everywhere in this country with the exception of Newfoundland, which I hope to get to soon. In my feeling and experience, the ignorance and the racism exists everywhere. And it's a problem that we all have to contend with. I'm really proud of where my community's evolved to and where it's come to. We've had recently well over 100 Syrian refugees come into this community, and the way they've been embraced by the community has been really heartening. I think part of our job, Charles, and for those of us that are in Northern Ontario, is we have to obviously sell and communicate. We have to get in the red bag, but we also have to be welcoming. We have to, in a sincere, real way, be welcoming. And I frankly think you're seeing that. And I think you're seeing a lot of growth and evolution in the small city centers, in the urban areas, the rural areas. And the more immigration and migration that we receive, the more you'll see that. So I certainly don't have any feeling that my community in the north, where I've spent most of my life, is any different than or has any more larger prevalence or any more larger significance of ignorant activities than you've seen in other cities, larger city centers that I've lived in.
You start every broadcast with a commentary. And you're a CBC host who's supposed to be, I guess, fair and neutral and objective and all that other stuff.
As I am.
And yet you do opinion as well. And I wonder how you get away with doing that.
Well, let me just correct you mildly.
Okay.
I like to think of it as reportage, not opinion. If I say, for example, that Donald Trump is a serial liar, that's not an opinion.
That's an empirically provable fact.
Indeed, exactly. So when management comes down on me, I try and suggest, in a slightly argumentative way, that I'm reporting something, not opining.
And they buy that?
Sometimes they don't.
What happens when they don't?
Well, letters go to the ombudsman and things, and there's an investigation, and I have had my knuckles rapped, and that's appropriate. I mean, I think that's true. I wrote a piece on the Sunday. It was Holocaust weekend, and I wrote a piece about an anti-Semite who wrote me a letter from Alberta. Said, I'm never listening to your show again because all I ever hear are Jews and jazz. And I thought, that's my next program.
Jews and
Good
jazz.
evening, welcome to Jews and Jazz. I'm Michael Enright. Here's Benny Goodman. I mean, that to me is, that's reportage. I mean, that's not to make fun of anti-Semitism because I'm the parent of a Jew, but again, the CBC has allowed me to go into the corners and put my elbows up, and it's a gift. It's a real gift.
But people know that you're a small L liberal, right? People who listen to the program basically know that about you.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I think the country is small L liberal. I think the country is slightly left of center.
So you figure you're reflective of your listeners?
I do, and I think because I grew up in a big city but downtown, and didn't have any money, and went through all of the school things in high school and all that stuff, with the sole exception of not being able to skate or play hockey. I think I know the people. I know the folks. My father's people came from Ireland during the famine years in the 1840s. And we are, I hope, typical Canadians.
Can you see, though, why a conservative listening to your program and hearing you say that might have their head explode because they're thinking they don't get a fair shake on your show?
Absolutely. And I don't know how many conservatives, small C conservatives or right-wingers I've interviewed over the years, a goodly number, and I think we should have more of them. I think that there is a problem in media in this town and in the country perhaps, that we don't hear from that element, politically, culturally, socially. And I think we should. I read, a National Review, and I watch Breitbart and Fox and Friends and that kind of thing to get a sense of what they're saying and thinking. But you're absolutely right. It's very tricky to walk that balance, and it's incumbent on us as public broadcasters to walk it.
May I ask you about Mother Corp and CBC, life at the CBC?
Certainly.
What, in your judgment, does it do well? You've been there a long time. You'd know as well as anybody.
What it does the best is connect the country. You can get in a car in Victoria and drive to Ottawa and all the way along hear CBC radio, and you stay overnight in the motel, you get the television. It does connect the country. It also is, I think, the thing that has kept the North as part of the Canadian consciousness. I don't know how many languages we broadcast in, but and to be up there is amazing. Every year I spend time in Newfoundland and in a little outport on Bonavista Vista Bay. And local radio is so magical and is so important to these people. I'm sure that the people on local radio in Newfoundland know most of their audience by name. I mean, it's so intimate and connected. It's the connectedness that CBC does well.
I'm going to ask you the flip side.
Of course.
What does it not do so well?
I don't think, well, we haven't done very well in persuading governments to give us money.
You just got $150 million a year out of these guys.
Correcting the Paul Martin cuts in the 90s, which were devastating, particularly local television, local radio. I don't know that we handle politics all that well. I mean by that, schmoozing and lobbying and so on. We've never been able to get 5-year funding, stable funding, ever. We've never had a broadcaster, or never had a person from Toronto as president of the CBC, ever. We had somebody who was a chair of CBC. And I don't know that we're very good at grooming people for either on-air jobs or producer jobs or whatever, because a lot of our training money was taken away by television. I think that there's a lot of room to improve in that. I think we've come to cope with the digital age in a terrific way, far beyond my understanding. I mean, I don't know Facebook or any, but the young people there, who are a hell of a lot smarter than when I started in the business, know it cold. And they're inventive and innovative and imaginative, and that's 3 eyes.
Death is the last great taboo, and the consequence of death, grief, is profoundly misunderstood. We seem happy to talk about sex or failure or to expose our deepest vulnerabilities, but on death, we are silent. Why still death such a taboo?
I think it's because there's a kind of magical thinking that if I don't think about it and if I don't talk about it, it's not going to happen to me.
That's not true?
And you sort of think it's going to happen to other people. And then that leaves this huge gap of understanding, which then is filled with fear. So when it does happen, whether it's to your parent or a partner or whoever it is, it then becomes something that's much more frightening than it needs to be.
Because we're totally unprepared for it.
Because we're totally unprepared for it, and we don't know what's normal. I mean, what I hoped with these stories is I show that people are as different on the inside as we look on the outside, but there are universal norms in grief. And the big one is that it hurts, it's painful. And it's really the things that we do to avoid the pain, like taking lots of drugs, working really hard, things that anesthetize it, that do us harm, not allowing ourselves to have its own natural process.
We should point out that that is what the book is. It's a collection of very personal stories about people whom you've had contact with, worked with over the years. How do we, let's start to think about then, how we go about building more openness into the way we talk about death. How do we do that?
I think we need to start having conversations with the people that we love. I mean, what I'd like is to talk about death, not as often as we talk about birth, but in the same kind of way. That, you know, talk to each other when it isn't likely to be close, you know, when you're going for a walk and you're outside, and just to have an exploratory conversation, like, where do you want to be buried? Do you think you go to heaven? What do you fear about death? So that you begin to have a familiarity with yourself and each other. So when it does happen, that you have much more confidence in facing it.
Well, here's why we don't do that. Number one, that's considered macabre, right?
Oh, is it? Right.
Well, it is. It's considered macabre to talk about death when it's not imminent. And number two, we are superstitious enough to believe that if we talk about it, we...
make it happen.
Exactly. So how do you want us to get around those very ingrained cultural imperatives on us right now?
I mean, I hope a book like mine will help move the dial a bit. I think, funny enough, younger people, because of the digital social media channels, are better at it than, I'm older than you, than our generation, because everything they do is photographed and transmitted. So if a young person goes to a funeral, they send it viral. If a young person is ill, everybody follows them on their Instagram feed. So
but they think they're never going to die. So they're, in some respects, not the most eligible people to talk about this kind of stuff.
Well, someone who's sick with a diagnosis, actually often are the people that do talk about it. Huh. So they help change the dial. I hope it's people like you and me talking about it that will help. But, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. But I think the reaction I've had from the book is that a lot of people come, and a lot of people actually do want to talk about it.
They want permission to talk about it.
They want permission, and they want a focus for it. And then that will give them confidence to talk with other people.
Here's another excerpt. Our culture is imbued with the belief that we can fix just about anything and make it better. Or if we can't, that it's possible to trash what we have and to start all over again. Grief is the antithesis of this belief. It eschews, boy, that's a great British word. It eschews avoidance and requires endurance and forces us to accept that there are some things in this world that simply cannot be fixed. I want to, at the risk of boring you here, share a brief anecdote. I remember talking to my own dad about this, about his grandparents, who buried 2 children and a son-in-law who was 39 years old at the time of his death.
Goodness.
And I had that exact reaction. How did my great-grandparents, Dad, your grandparents, cope with that much misery in their lives? And his answer was, people were tougher back then, and death was simply more present, and therefore they coped. Is death harder to accept now than it was back then?
Well, I think the difference with their generation is that it wasn't then the science and technology generation that we live now. So the minute someone's ill now, once they're through the hospital doors, they think medicine's going to take over, and medicine is the new kind of God and gives you hope. And death is hidden, so people don't tend to die at home. We don't have many rituals like black armbands or any of the familiar rituals that your great-grandparents would have had. So death in their time was much more part of life, and there would have been more conversations. And of course there was much more death, you know, because medicine wasn't as good as it is now. And I think in some respects they were tougher because they didn't have our kind of blissful ignorance that we can overcome everything. They were much more accepting that there are some things we are powerless, and those things we have to find a way of living with. And I think there's some of us that's lost that now.
Yeah, we don't call them the greatest generation for nothing, do we? I mean, they did have something going on there.
They were amazing, yeah.
That is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, February 16th, 2018. You can see all of those programs in full at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.